Hello and welcome back. I probably shouldn't be doing this video because there are things I sort of need to be doing, but I figured I would because I've got a couple things going, but they're coming along pretty slow. But expect to see some new videos in the next little while. I'll hopefully have one up by next week, but we'll see. Anyway, today I want to talk about albums that are hard to listen to for reasons that don't have to do with the music. And I'm talking like this could be little things or this could be absolutely massive emotional trauma. You name it. Just any kind of album that there's a reason that isn't in the music that you don't really get into it. And I think to start off with probably the earliest examples of this, there are some Pink Floyd albums that I can't really listen to anymore. Like I was listening to The Wall the other night for the first time in like 5 years, and I was amazed at how much I was cringing at a lot of it. And the reason for it is that I've gone into this before. I got into Pink Floyd the way a lot of people my age got into like emo bands or like bad heavy metal or like what have you. Like I was into Pink Floyd during that phase of your life where you're the cringy 12-year-old who likes things and is a little disturbing, and when you look back on that period in your life from a perspective of being like a later teenager and in your 20s, you basically cannot think of anything from that phase of your life without cringing involuntarily. And that's kind of how a lot of The Wall is for me. I just... It makes me cringe, especially because when I realize as an adult that there is some serious like angry 12-year-old kind of poetry happening in The Wall. And Roger was like 35 when he made it, but anyway. So I get that with The Wall, and to a much lesser degree, The Final Cut. The other big one is anything Muse did. I just turns me off, and there's a bit of a story behind this. So it's Muse, but it's more specifically The Second Law by Muse. And I got The Second Law in like late 2015 or early 2016. I don't really remember now, but it was somewhere at that point. And I really liked it for about 3 weeks. It was just rocking it out, playing it all the time. Just really dug the album. I dug how bombastic and overblown it was, and just how everything sounded like a ridiculous parody of U2 mixed with Queen. I was in a different place in 2015, and anybody who watched my content in 2015 and 2016 is aware of that. So anyway, I dug it. I got some of their other stuff. I got what at the time was their most recent album, and the one before The Second Law, the name of which is blanking. I'm forgetting at the moment. And I liked those two, not as much as The Second Law, but I liked them a fair bit. And anyway, what wound up happening was that about 3 weeks later, I had a breakup, and just everything that Muse did is like tainted by that, and I cannot listen to them. I tried not too long ago, and I can't listen to them without it taking me back to that time. And it's not good, and it sucks because I liked the album, and I still kind of like The Second Law. The other stuff they did, not so much. But I liked The Second Law, and it was unfortunate that it kind of got ruined for me. Sort of the same thing happened to me with Mastodon. I got into them around the same time, a little earlier. I was mostly done with them by the time the breakup happened, so they got hit with this a lot less hard than Muse did. But there was still a period of time when I didn't really listen to Mastodon because they brought up memories of that point in my life. Nowadays, I look at it on a little more of a low-key note, and I'm a little more circumspect on it, I think. But anyway. And the other set of albums like that is basically anything I was into in the summer of 2017, because as I have described in gross detail elsewhere on the channel, 2017 was just a really bad year for me in general, and the summer of 2017 was like, and the summer of 2017 was pretty much like one of the lowest points of my entire life. So pretty much anything I liked at that point has a bad memory attached to it, like with like one or two exceptions. Like I got into David Bowie during the second half of the summer, and like I think that's probably why I have as much affection for David Bowie as I do, is that I got into him at a really, really bad time in my life, and I don't know, I just latched onto it maybe a little harder than I would have otherwise. I don't know. I would say the album that is hit the worst by those sort of bad memories associated with the summer of 2017 is that the Style Council's Confessions of a Pop Group, which is a really great album. It's probably the best Style Council album, actually, and it's an album I'm doing a review on, so watch for that at some point in the future. But it's an album that is just, I don't listen to it often. I've probably listened to it in full 5 times since I bought it. And the reason for that is that I bought it the day that our dog died, really, really suddenly. I've talked about this before. He just died. He just died like that. It was incredibly upsetting. And it's never easy to lose a pet, but it's harder when it happens suddenly and they're young, which he was. Yeah, it was just bad. And I got the album the morning he died. I drove up to the record shop at like 9, 10 o'clock. I got the record at 11. I listened to it on the way home, listened to the whole thing. I probably got home at 11 o'clock, and he died at like 2. He died at like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So it was very much right on the day of, and so as you can imagine, that happening has just negative. That album has just negative association upon negative association upon negative association attached to it, and so the dog dies, and then I have jury duty the next day, and then like a week later my car gets wrecked. So. Oh, and speaking of which, the other album that is kind of tainted by that, because I got the album like 3 days before Jack died, was, and again, I think I've talked about this on a podcast I did with Travis from Bloody Chuckle Studios, like a 1.5 to 2 years ago. It was California by Mr. Bungle, which is not as tainted anymore. It's kind of like those Mastodon albums. It's something, eventually I said, I'm going to listen to this a lot now. Now being like a year after all of this happened, so that I'll associate it with something else. And it worked for the most part. There's a couple tracks on there that still have bad associations, like Vanity Fair, but it's not tainted to me to the degree that Confessions of a Pop Group is. And really, it took a long time for me to be able to listen to parts of Confessions of a Pop Group without crying, which makes me sound like an emotional wreck, but you know, we do have emotions. And I think we all are kind of wrecks in some way or shape or form. But that's a little emo for today, John. Anyway, that's about it as far as albums that I have deep personal connections with, as far as, you know, things that I are really like emotionally tainted for me for one reason or the other. There are a couple albums I like that are hard to get through now because the person who created them is now passed on and they have just associations attached to them. I have a hard time listening to Spirit of Eden these days now that Mark Hollis is gone. Black Star by David Bowie is just a really raw album that is really hard to listen to, and I've probably, again, only listened to it 3 or 4 times because I did not get in on that sweet spot before Bowie died, and I would have very much liked, you know, going back, because I wasn't a David Bowie fan at the time. I think I made some terrible video about his death, which I realized was terrible like a month later, and then I took it down, but I don't remember. The point is, I was not a David Bowie fan at the time of his death. I remember being a little weirded out, actually, at how emotionally affected I was by his death, considering that I wasn't a fan at the time. And I still am a little weirded out by that. But the point is, I wasn't a fan, and so I didn't get Black Star because I was like, this is an album almost 50 years into this man's career. It's probably not going to be all that good. And of course, he died like 2 days later. And so I avoided it for like over 2 years. I didn't check Black Star out and I didn't buy it until I think like October of last year. And when I did listen to it, I was like, it was a little too much, and I think it wasn't the last song, but I think it was Dollar Days that finally got to me, where he's talking about if I never see those English evergreens or something like that, and that just I don't know, that album is a little too much. Like, it's a great album, but I don't listen to it much, and I gotta be in a right kind of mindset to listen to it. So anyway, that was my list of traumatizing albums. I have this thing about not looking at the camera directly. I don't really understand what it is, but I've been doing it in the video, so I'm sorry if that weirded you out. Like I said, that was my traumatizing albums list. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what your traumatizing albums are. But until then, have a good night.